Good evening. We'll call the meeting to order for the April 23rd Board of Zoning and Appeals meeting for this evening. Please be advised that the Board of Zoning and Appeals acts as a quasi-judicial body hearing appeal matters and requests for code exceptions. Testimony will be accepted from all persons interested in speaking on an item. Persons interested in speaking will be asked to approach the lectern to state their name, address, and interest in the matter at hand. All testimony shall be directed to the chair, be relative to the item of business being discussed, and be presented with conduct appropriate to the setting. Any person exhibiting behavior deemed inappropriate by the chairperson of this body will be ordered to leave the premises. Once all persons wishing to speak on matter have spoken, the floor will be closed and the board will deliberate amongst themselves before taking final action on the item. The order of a business will be conducted as follows. The minutes of the previous meeting will be reviewed and acted upon. Old business will be conducted. New business will be conducted. Other business will be conducted, and then the meeting will be adjourned. Conduct of hearing for variance and appeal items utilize a modified Robert's Rules of Order in the hearing the items of business. The clerk will read the agenda item. The staff will comment and respond to questions from the board. Applicant will comment and respond to questions from the board. Public will be given an opportunity to comment. The public comment will be closed. The board will deliberate on the item. During this time, the chair may request witnesses to return to the lectern to respond to additional questions from the board. Upon hearing a motion, the board will stop discussion on the matter and the chair will ask if there is a second motion. Hearing a motion and a second, the chair will ask the clerk to call roll and a vote on the motion will be recorded. If there are no objections from anyone in attendance to the aforementioned meeting procedures, would everyone present please stand and raise your right hand to be sworn in? Let it be known that all persons present to provide testimony at this April 23rd BZA meeting hereby swear to affirm said testimony will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth. All those in agreement, please say I do. I do. All those opposed, please say opposed. Thank you. You may be seated. If you have not already signed the book, the sign-in sheet at the back of the room, please do so now or before you leave today. That information becomes part of the permanent record and documents who was in attendance at the meeting today. Thank you all for attending this evening, and we will go ahead and get started. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Wayne Davey.
Here.
Mr. Wade Davis.
Here.
Mr. Adam Sees.
Here.
Miss Eva Silvers.
Here.
Miss Debbie Stein.
Here.
Everyone has a copy of the meeting minutes in their packet. And everyone has had a chance to review. Do we have any comments or corrections? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the minutes from March 26, 2024.
I second. So I have a motion by Debbie to accept the meeting minutes from March 26th and a second by Adam. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Sees.
Aye.
Mr. Davey.
Aye.
Miss Silvers.
Aye.
Mr. Davis.
Aye.
Miss Stein.
Aye.
So let the record indicate that the meeting minutes from March 26th have been approved and accepted. I don't believe there's any old business that we need to review. If not, we'll move on to the new business. We have two resolutions this evening, and clerk, would you please read the first resolution?
Resolution BZA 524, a resolution to consider the decision of the enforcing official concerning a carport at 308 Broadway.
Good evening.
Aaron Wilson, the Code Compliance Coordinator at the City of Piqua. Welcome new members. First of all, we were called out to 308 Broadway from a citizen's complaint regarding the property on January 22nd of 2024. At the base.
Is it behind it, Aaron? Behind the speaker?
There we go.
All right.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Thank you,
Mr.
Chad.
President.
IT. Thanks, IT.
Thank you, Emily.
Again, Aaron Morrison, Code Compliance Coordinator for the City of Piqua. We were called out to 308 Broadway for a citizen complaint regarding the property on January 22nd of this year, 2024. The next day, the 23rd, my partner Derek and I went out, inspected the property, witnessed all the violations on the property, and mailed a notice out to the owner at his address. That owner being, sorry about that. Where's my paper? Mr. Steve Drapp. Did not hear anything after the notice went out on January 23rd. February 21st, some family stopped in the office, Amber and Josh, who are present, and notified me that unexpectedly their father had just passed and asked to have some more time to work on the notice and just get everything squared away. Totally understandable. We agreed, take your time. We'll, get back together when the time is right. March 12th, we then received a letter from the family appealing the code violation notice. Also in March on the 22nd, I received an email from the family's attorney, Jack Him, asking for an extension because the estate had to go through the court process. Again, no problem. And we extended it out until August 1st. As this week we re-inspected the property, some violations still exist, and here we are today. So I'll be glad to answer any questions or.
So how many total violations still exist?
Offhand, I don't know. I know the carport is still standing. I believe they have some painting to do. There's some remnants of some old trees, like tree stumps and things that need to be taken out yet. And maybe some gutter work on the back of the house.
Aaron, is this property, is it still going through probate court?
As far as I'm aware, it is, yes.
So has council decided legally that we can make a determination at this point in time with it going through probate?
That, can you chime in?
I mean, I think we're working with them as they proceed through the thing. I think they were just appealing whether they can keep the carport or not, correct? is what's
believe
being
so.
brought before you
Yeah.
guys.
And I believe they're going to be the new owners of the property, so.
So regardless, a carport, whether going through probate or not, is non-conforming or,
Correct. Prior to the old code, they were not permitted, and then when the new code went into effect last year, it's black and white, absolutely no carports. We went back and did do our research, did some digging. There's never been a permit obtained. There's less than a handful in the city that do have a permit. One being we dug out of the basement from the very early 90s. Obviously, had this one had a permit, the location would have been a different spot, because as it stands now, it's too close to the property line also. So that was another sign that there was never any permit obtained for that carport.
are all carports within the city being removed, or we talked about that grandfather
As
issue?
as we come across them, as there's violations on the property, if there's never been any permits, then yes, they're cited to take their carport down.
But
to
if
the-
they have a permit, they're able to
That-
keep it?
If there was a permit, yes, they are allowed to keep it. I believe a former commissioner, maybe, had received a permit, and he has a carport.
I don't like to use grandfather clause, but yes, if something was permitted, when new zoning takes effect, they can continue as an existing nonconformity. I think the situation here is that it was never a permitted structure. We have not found evidence that it was a permitted structure. So this would be like the rest of them that you guys obviously weren't here, but we brought before the board.
Do you know when that code went into, when did we originally stop? When did we write into the development code that there were no carports to be allowed? Was that in the 90s? Was that in the 2000s? I'm just curious.
So we've had a zoning code since the 30s. The previous code was, took effect in the 90s and I think modified mid-90s. And then the newest code was all redone last year. I can tell you, my partner and I did some math today, and to this date, we have taken down 18 carports throughout the city. And there, like I said, less than a handful that have gotten a permit, so.
Let me ask it this way. When was the first year that a permit was required for a carport?
I don't know if there's ever been a
If-
permit required.
If I could. A carport is a detached accessory structure. It's no different than if someone built a garage in their backyard that wasn't connected to their house. Under city ordinances, you're allowed to usually have a shed, which is up to 200 square feet, or you could have a detached accessory structure, which is usually made for car storage, up to, I think it's 720 square feet. So there was never a permit taken out for a detached accessory structure, is what's being presented. To Adam's question, when were metal kit carports, they were outlawed in May of 2023. And I think they were specifically referenced because there was a lot of things that went into the metal kit carports as far as design, how different things were sitting, how the roof was supposed to be structured and whatnot. That's the portion that you were sent regarding that. This existing structure right here doesn't necessarily have, if they were trying to put that up right now, it specifically says no metal kit carport. But what's being presented is that there was never a detached accessory structure permit filed for this. I hope that made sense.
Right, but if there was a detached structure constructed under the code at the time, as long as it met the requirements of the code, a permit or a variance would not have been required, correct?
If it met the requirements of the code, yes.
Okay.
This one does not because it's too close to the property line.
Chad, I have a question. With it still being in probate, do we have a legal right to rule on it until the judge has decided?
I think
who-
you have a right to rule whether or not that this could be taken out of the CVN or not. I think the violations is just a case. It's CVN case X number. So they're working towards that diligently, it would seem. I think their ask is, we would like to maintain that carport as a part of it. So even if it's disallowed, it's still their property. It doesn't affect who owns it or whatever. It's just to come into compliance,
Okay,
whether or not they can take that out.
So if they would reduce the size by 40 feet and move it away from the property line, they could keep the carport?
No, they could not, because
Okay.
metal kit carports are not allowed.
Is that because of danger of blowing away, or?
I think it was a decision by the city planner and the planning commission at that time that they wrote it into the codes. I think some were going in and people were complaining about them. I can't speak to why they were done that way, but I came in September, this was adopted in May, and it was probably in the works 2 years before that. I think the city of Piqua just decided they did not want to see these metal kit carports. They wanted something aesthetically pleasing that would match the house and add to property value.
Is that it?
Any other questions for the staff?
And you said this began in January, and what does that end date of August mean that you were referring to?
That is just like a new due date that they would like to try to have all the violations completed by August.
Including the carport as well?
Right. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Would the applicant like to approach the lectern to speak? Sure. Yeah, please state your name and your address.
Amber Reeser, 518 West High Street.
Joshua Kunkel, 518 West High Street.
This is our first BZA meeting, so thank you for considering our appeal. Looks like I've got a naughty carport on my hands. I inherited that among many other things. Yeah, I'm a drap, so I feel like someone in here knows a drap.
Oh, definitely. Yep.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, my dad passed 2 months ago, just a couple weeks after his 63rd birthday, and I found this appeal letter in his house. Of course, he didn't have an opportunity to address it. He was never married. I'm his only child and the sole beneficiary of his estate. You know, like Chad said, we have every intention to address all the other violations. You know, we like a pretty place too. And my dad took a lot of pride in his property. This particular property was maybe a bit of the exception, but it was an ongoing project for him. The carport is very functional and useful for us. We park our car under it. I don't know. Did you want to say anything, honey? Oh,
It's been there since '95, according to the county auditor records. The zoning code at the time, the planning code at the time was from 1990. We looked it up, that you didn't need a permit to have a carport back then. So if we feel that it falls under a pre-existing non-conforming use.
Are you currently living in the house?
Part-time. Yeah.
Do you plan on moving into the house full-time?
Yeah.
That is, we're working on that. Working on getting this one a job in the area, if anyone knows of any. But, yeah.
So I read your letter that you tried to establish when what you dug up, what information you dug up, and why it should meet the non-conforming pre-existing condition. And sometimes you know, the city tries to help out as best they can. You try to do your digging, right? Because, you know, nobody's perfect. No institution's perfect. So you try to dig as much as you can. So I think what we're trying to look at is, at the time this was constructed, you know, was a variance required at the time? And so, I mean, I still have to ask the city, you know, according to the code back then, was it still, you know, 3 feet of setback from the property line? Because I look at the house and I go, I don't even know if the house is 3 feet of setback from the property line. I can't even figure that out in the picture yet. So, you know, we try to figure out, you know, was it, at the time, was it constructed, did it meet all the requirements? So we're still trying to, I think we're getting there, but, you know, any information you can dig up is helpful, and I think your letter explains what you know. So I think we're just trying to put all the pieces together. I don't know what do you think this was constructed in 94? Is that what, do you know?
We can't say that with any certainty. We know that the auditor says they were charging taxes for it starting in 95. Probably it was before that, and that's when the auditor got wind of it and started charging the previous owner's taxes on it.
Okay. Because I think we pulled up aerials from 94 that showed it there, I think.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay, so we know it's there in 94. We're trying to figure out what the code was in 94, you know, and figure out, was it built properly at the time? And then, yeah, so I mean, then I look at like, well, if the house is not anyway, we got some homework to do, I think, and I don't know if we can figure that out today or not. So we're trying to get to a decision, or, you know, we just got to pull back a couple pieces of the onion. You see where I'm going with this, or?
Yeah, I think on the letter where you're talking about, there was no code for carports back then, but there was, because they were actually called
Detached accessory structure.
detached
They're still called that.
accessory structures, what they were called back then. So there was code then prohibiting the build of the carport.
It would govern the build, or any detached garage structure.
And there was a Board of Zoning Appeals where they could have applied for a structure permit. If it was declined, then they could have asked for an appeal.
Sure.
Just like currently.
Sure.
Okay.
I read the code of 1990. It says carports, and it specifically says a permit is not required.
Yeah, I want to dig into that.
We have no evidence of that.
I wanna dig into
Where
that.
did you find that code?
I made a public records request with your records department, and she gave it to me.
Do you have a copy of it with you here?
I do not. I could forward an email to Chad.
That
Are you
would be
certain it
helpful.
wasn't Miami County building regulations?
It was the city of Piqua.
Okay. I mean, we looked into the same, we did not find that. Hence why it was brought to you.
When did you request that information, do you know? I mean, not exact date, but was it this year?
Yes, it was this year, late February, early March, somewhere in that ballpark. I wouldn't have filed the appeal if I hadn't read through the code and saw that it was prohibited back then.
Okay. Yeah, I actually want to look at the code unless staff has a, you know, position on it. If we don't know any more information, I'm willing to table this or something, because we got to dig into it a little more.
I would certainly like to see, if you could email that, I'd like to see that information.
Sure.
Then one other question, basically for Chad. Have we had other residents that we've had citizens take down their carports due to, even if they've filed the correct permit and they've been told it's a metal carport, that they've had to take that down?
Trying to make sure I'm answering correctly. If something was applied for prior to May of 2023, and it was say a 10 by 20, something of that nature, it would have been approved as a detached accessory structure, assuming it met setback regulations and whatnot. I feel like I'm missing a part.
I
We
can't quite remember the name of the citizen, but there's something that I've seen somewhere out there by the last name of France, maybe, stating I had to take my carport down, a brand-new carport. The city,
Right, so,
maybe Aaron knows something.
well,
Does
any,
that sound familiar at all, or am I?
I mean, like I said, I know we've had 18 of them taken down.
you're not allowed to do a metal kit carport anymore. It has to be aesthetically pleasing. If something was done prior to May of 23,
2023.
it would have had to have had a permit to accompany it
Okay.
as a detached accessory structure. It could have been approved, but we do not have a permit on file for this.
Could we possibly table this to the next meeting?
Of course. And if you guys had, particular questions you wanted answers, we could, we could come up with the requirements needed to do that. We could use Mr. Kunkel's reference to his public records request.
Yeah.
I didn't fulfill that public records request. I don't know where it came from. I'm not to insult you. I just didn't know whether it was Miami County or us.
It was City of Piqua Records and Archives or something like that. Whoever does public records, the city.
I mean, I have old zoning books. We looked through them. I never found anything to it. But, I mean, I'm more than willing
Is
to.
there a chance to get us a copy of like the zoning year that would apply, 1990, for example?
Yeah,
That's what he
I'm
has,
sure we
yeah.
can get something,
Yeah.
yeah.
Whether
That
they give
sounds
it
like
to
that's
us or
what-
you give it to us, just so we have it.
Yeah, I think what Chad is saying is you got it from the city of Piqua, but was it a city of Piqua zoning, or was it the county zoning you got from the city of Piqua? You see, so,
Right, normally building regulations, they govern the structure, we govern the placement,
Okay.
and whether you can or not. That's why I asked, because usually Miami County, if you were building something, they would inspect the 2x4s, the roof trusses, all that. We would just dictate where the pacing would go.
okay.
So first and foremost, I'm extremely sorry for the loss of your dad. How quickly could you get a copy to the BZA of your public records request?
It's just a matter of an email forward. We can do it right here, right now. Yeah.
Do you want to spend the time looking at that? I mean, we could at least determine if it's city code or county code, right?
I mean, it's your guys' work session. I mean, it seems like something you would do a work session for, but, it's your guys'
Well,
meeting.
if we could at least determine real quickly, if they could email it to you real fast to see if it's city or county, and then if it is city, I think we should table it. That's my feeling. If that's truly
Yeah.
something that was a records request belonging to the city of Piqua, I would recommend tabling. If it's county,
I feel like to properly review and make sure that we don't get in the same situation, we should table it and make sure we review all evidence.
Yeah, I agree. This should not be a work session. I would entertain a motion to table this till the next scheduled BZA. The applicant should have 7 days to provide the email, and then the city would have 3 weeks to review it and put it back in the staff report, and we'll reconvene at the next BZA meeting.
I'll
second
everyone's-
that.
motion.
I'll entertain a motion.
I'll
I'll make a
motion to,
motion to table.
and I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion to table BZA
For the matter of minutes,
/24.
can we figure out who is going to make the official motion and who's
I'll make the
second?
motion.
Mr. C's, and then who's making the official second?
I'll second it.
Ms. Silvers? Okay. Thank you.
So I have a motion and a second to table resolution BZA 5-24. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Ms. Stein?
Aye.
Ms. Silvers?
Aye.
Mr. C's?
Aye.
Mr. Davy?
Aye.
So let the record show that the BZA 5-24 has been tabled with the requirement of providing the backup support information from the code from the applicant to the city, attention to Chad within 7 days, and then we'll reconvene at our next, this will be added to old business for our next board meeting. Is that acceptable? Okay. So we'll have our first old business to review. Okay. So we will move on now to Resolution BZA 6-24. Clerk, would you please read the resolution?
A resolution seeking 4 variances at Hartsel Propeller, Inc., located at 1900 Covington Avenue, Piqua. Variances include requirement of landscape islands, maneuvering land required with pedestrian access ways required for accessible movement within lots, and perimeter screening.
Chad, will you be providing the staff report?
So this is at 1900 Covington Avenue. This is Hartsel Propeller. I guess it would be the middle tract out of the 3. Basically, what's been going on is Hartsel is putting in 2 new parking lots and doing some site renovations. They came to us with a plan that we reviewed and provided comments on. Following our comments, we obviously reviewed them to our specifications, and there was a few that they wanted to try to request relief from. And those is what's basically been provided here. Just very quickly, they asked about the stormwater calculations. They asked about a variance for the requirement of landscape islands between rows. They requested a variance for the maneuvering lane size. They requested a variance for the pedestrian access ways, and they requested a variance for perimeter screening on the primary street lot line. Their comments were responded. They were in a letter where they explained why, and perhaps they would be able to speak more to it here when they get up to speak. Try to provide all the evidence or all the basically what they were asking for and kind of the reasoning for why it was existed. But I can just say, long and short, skipping to the end, and I'm more than welcome to do this. In regards to stormwater, this was submitted earlier this month when we met. It was towards the end of March, early April. I believe most of the stormwater regulations have been taken care of one way or the other, but that's not an appealable thing. That's a state of Ohio thing, and it was really a matter of language that was being discussed, and I think that we arrived at a solution. Regarding the landscape islands, when I say western parking lot, I mean that's just for that site. So there's 2 parking lots. There's one to the west and one to the east. So it's within that parcel is what I'm referring to. The western parking lot, you could make a case for maybe the bottom right. It goes a little bit longer in some areas, and it's not really bordering anything. But the one to the east, to me, seems like it was designed without any regulations in mind. It was kind of put in. It violated every regulation we had. I just felt like I don't see a reason as to why we need to allude to our regulations to make that work. Regarding the maneuvering lane, we varied our maneuvering lane for the Scott Drive development last month. The code calls for 28 feet. In looking at our code and the intent, our intent is to have more green space, less asphalt. But then we go and we oversize our maneuvering lane, if that makes sense. I believe that requirement should give us some leeway, and I think that's what I'm going to bring before Planning Commission to talk about. But I think that we could get away with something saying 24 to 28, depending on how the turns go, to give us a little bit more leeway to review. They turned in a fire truck template, which you guys do not have, but just to make sure that our apparatus could get through the parking lot, and at the 26-foot maneuvering lane it can. So on the maneuvering lane, I was fine with recommending approval of that variance. The pedestrian access ways, the intent of a pedestrian access way is to get a walker or multimodal transportation to the front door from the public right-of-way. Because of how far back this parking lot sits, It's not extremely reasonable to assume someone is going to walk from Covington all the way to the front door. So I had no problem recommending, I mean, this is an existing structure. If it was built new, we would obviously come up with a system that included everything. This one, it's not really set up to be that way with some of the elevation through the front. I just felt like the pedestrian access way wasn't of importance here because we're remedying or rectifying an existing structure. And then finally, for the variance on the low impact screening, we call for low impact, we call for 80% screening across the parking lot. Because of how far back off the road this is, they have proposed perhaps we could put in a 3-foot mound system or something of that nature. I'm not a fan of the mound. We don't have anything in our zoning that allows for a mound to serve as screening. I know, and we've all probably seen mounds at subdivisions and whatnot to break it up. I don't see a reason as to why we should have to go away from our screening requirements on this. Now, because it is so far back off the road, I could see working with them, maybe instead of 80%, we recommend 50% screening or something that's still serving the intent of the code, but because it sits so far back and it's not right on the public right of way, that we could work with them on a percentage. So I know that was a lot, and if you have any questions, feel free to fire.
And the area for the screening is the part that would face Covington Avenue,
Correct.
which is Route 36.
Correct. And in those, a lot of times, if you have cars maneuvering on a lot, you don't want the light shining out into that. There's a lot of different reasons to do that.
Yeah.
Certainly breaking up the monotony and creating a more aesthetically pleasing situation.
So you're saying that there is not a need for the variance regarding the stormwater? That,
Stormwater is an EPA thing. What it was is we were talking about the way to detain water. They asked to do it away. We wanted it done a different way, and I think we've come to the agreement on how to do it, but it wasn't necessarily a governing body of the BZA. It was an Ohio EPA requirement. So it was, to get technical, it was an oversized pipe that was storing water. We didn't want an underdrain underneath of it because we wanted the water release rate to be a little bit different than what was being provided, and that's been remedied on the plans.
that wouldn't have any effect with Leonard's Ditch or anything that crosses over Covington?
No.
Okay.
No, anytime you add impervious area, it's, the long and short of it is if a raindrop of water hits a corner of a property, and however long it takes for that to run across the property to the lowest point on grass, still needs to be comparable when you pave the entire thing. Obviously, paving speeds up water runoff, so we come up with the tension on site so that it's released at a comparable time than when it was undeveloped, is the real broad. And what they did, they oversized a pipe, so when water went in there, we kind of had our regulations set up that it was going to retain water. They did not want to maintain that water. They wanted to get the water to the low point and then run it off the property. They came up with another way to do so and not have standing water. And when you have standing water, you run into mosquitoes and you need an aerator and different things like that. So their intent was to not have that, and we worked out I'm not speaking like out of turn, right, Matt? That's basically what it was. We found a way to get the waterway, still make all of the detention work. And
In proximity to where the parking lot is to where a bus route would be for the kids that live in the apartment, I don't know the time scheduling Propeller gets off work, but have we worked out something, or has Hartzell's worked out something if the bus was letting off as people were emptying out the parking lot on 36?
my assumption is that would come from the designer. That's, it was something I would point out if I knew it to be an issue, but since I've been here, I haven't heard any complaints. They're still serving the same functions that they're doing. They're just doing these.
This isn't gonna be like a higher volume of traffic. It'll be pretty much the
Probably
same.
during shift change, it's going to be no different than any other industrial use. And they might be better to speak on that particular one.
evening. My name is Matt Berkey. I'm with H.A. Dorston Construction Managers, representing Hartsel Propeller. Appreciate you hearing our case this evening. I think the first thing I want to point out is the two large parking lots we're talking about here are actually replacing two existing large parking lots. And if you've driven by there west of town, you go past Hartsel's main facility, which is very nice, very beautified. And they've now purchased what was formerly even flow warehousing, and it's being converted back into that building's original purpose, which was manufacturing. Back in the 60s, it was oil can manufacturing. I guess pointing out the fact that we're replacing two parking lots close to the same footprint as they were, this will be a huge improvement. The storm detention Chad spoke of, I'll put it on record, we agree. We've come to an agreement on that. We'll drop that issue. There's no variance. The design plans and engineering were updated for that issue. With regard to the one issue that Chad does take some contention was the landscape islands. Previously, those two lots did not have any islands at all. We've added 10 or more islands into those lots. We feel like we've, hit a direction towards the intent of that code, which was, creating a nice buffer at the end of the parking rows and having some green space and some landscape islands there. And Hartsel fully intends to beautify these spaces with landscaping, and we do not have a landscaping plan presented to the city yet. That's not been prepared yet, so that may be a future issue to talk to. But I would ask your consideration to allow the islands as we have them drawn, being they're not going to impede the snow plow. There is an island at each end of each row, and when you talk about 10 spaces between islands, we've got 13 here, 14 there. It's not a great disparity in our opinion, and I just thank you for your consideration to that issue.
Thank you. I do have one more question. On the application, 3 parcels were listed. Does everything that your work is going to entail fall under the 1 parcel in this resolution? You listed 2 other parcels.
We did. So, as Chad said, the center parcel is where a majority of this work takes place. Those 2 parking lots do overlap into the 3 parcels side by side that make up formerly even flow there at 1900 Covington Avenue. It does span across three parcels of land.
Well, should we amend that resolution to include those other 2 parcels?
Matt, I didn't have where it went over the 3. I had all the improvements on the middle one.
Okay. It's, and I'm looking at an auditor's map, not with me, but when I created that letter, when I wrote that letter, the property line literally splits the building, somewhere towards the east side of the building. And then on the west side, we might be clear of, there's a chance it falls on the 2, but I believe it just slightly overlaps. The parking spaces overlap onto that 3rd piece of land as well, parcel.
Well, I think if it does overlap, that the resolution should be amended to just include, for the record, the other 2 parcels. It really wouldn't have any true effect on anything, but it'd be accurate.
Right.
Well, on the actual application variance request, it lists the 3 partials.
Right.
Right, but we wrote the resolution for the middle, because that was the only one that we had is where there was changes taking place.
Well, that was the resolution.
Oh, yeah, he's saying the resolution, so here, yeah, he's saying this,
okay, I
this,
see.
the actual resolution, only this
Okay.
one parcel, so.
I did pull up for you, if you look behind you, the auditor's website, the parcel that's highlighted is the one that's referenced in the resolution.
So I would agree that 90% of the project falls on that centerpiece. On the left-hand parcel.
It's like the openings go out.
As
on
you look,
them.
yeah, the exits for the parking lot go into that left-hand parcel. And then on the right side, it would be just a small corner of that east parking lot crosses onto
Okay.
one propeller place. Or the-
We can add it. My apologies, I thought we had the whole thing on the one parcel.
That's good.
I think it would be accurate to include the other 2 parcels, because the application does state that. Overall, again, it doesn't have much of an effect, but it's for accuracy.
We'll just change it to the 3.
Could we make a motion to just go ahead and amend the resolution to add those other 2 parcels? So I would like to make a resolution. Can I see yours, Ethan?
You sure can. And this is his
A motion to the resolution.
This is the primary one
Yeah.
in the resolution.
So the resolution, I'm making a motion to add to resolution BZA 6-24 to include parcel ID number N44-100-120 and N44-1080 with the parcel N44, which is already included, N44-100-140.
All right, I second that motion.
So we have a motion from Debbie Stein to amend the resolution, BZA 6-24, and we have a second from Wayne Davies. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Davy,
Aye.
Mr. Sees,
Aye.
Ms. Stein,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Ms. Silvers.
Aye.
So let the record show that the motion to change resolution BZA 6-24 has been approved, and we'll move forward then. Do we have any other questions for the applicant? One question I have, the 80% screening, how high would that have been versus a 3-foot-high mound? And 3-foot-high is going to block most of the headlights from entering onto Route 36 at night.
That was our thought as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chad, the screening, the code calls for plantings, maybe a large tree every 40 feet. And we're talking about a road frontage out here that's 1,000+ feet. You're talking about quite a few large trees. The fact that we're talking about 4.5 acres of front lawn, there's a huge lawn area. The parking lot we're proposing is 125 feet off of the road. Our thought was we can kind of tag team by creating the storm detention. We can use that soil to create the mound and in a fairly easy effort, provide a blocking for the headlights and something to potentially add landscaping to in the future. they've got some mounding next door at one propeller place. They've got mulch and beautiful trees that are lit up at Christmas time. It's,
Sure.
and I think they fully intend to mesh those two properties in the future. It's not in the budget for this year, but, you know, plantings are certainly coming.
Well, it certainly makes sense to me. I mean, it's a lot of trees to maintain, and then you get into other issues if we have a bad storm down the road and stuff, so. Any other questions for the applicant? All right. Well, if there are no other comments, then I'll close the floor for if we have any questions. So we do have a question on item number 2. What we're looking at is, on the resolution, we're going to omit number 1 for the stormwater. That's not going to be part of the resolution. But number 2, for the variance of the landscape islands, and the staff is recommending denial. What is the plan? What's the plan there to build it 100% to code? And what is the current parking lot at the main Hartsel? This is going to be somewhat adjacent, and isn't this new design going to mirror that old, like the current parking lot at Hartsel?
In terms of mirroring, yes and no. So the differences between one propeller place and 1900, one propeller place is the place where the public would come to take a tour or potentially come for training from not only in the United States but across the globe. Unlike 1900 Covington Avenue, the topic today is strictly manufacturing, is strictly employees coming to park in those lots and use as far as the demand for landscape islands and pedestrian access ways, the way the parking lots are oriented, an employee would come and park their car, travel down the maneuvering lane, and go towards the front door, which is near the center of the building. I don't know if I answered your question or not, but I know next door, if you've ever been by there, it's a really unique parking lot. It's
Sure.
a radius shape.
Yeah, it's a radius.
There was a extensive effort to create a showpiece over there because it is a national and international draw to that front door. This is more of a manufacturing and utility type use in our opinion.
Okay. So on item number 2, what is your actual request? So you're requesting a variance to have islands between every 10 spaces instead of every 12 or 13?
Correct. So I guess we could, the request would be a landscape island between, in the worst case, I think was 17 spaces between islands, but there's every number in between as well.
And the code requires 10.
Where's the code
The
pictures?
code demands 10
Okay.
between each island, correct.
Do you have the code pictures? Maybe they're on email.
So building to code, how many parking spaces do you lose? I assume that's the issue?
It is. It's also just that practicality's sake of, for example, in that west lot, you've got a row of, I think it's 12 or 13 spaces between islands. So I need to break that down into 10 or less. You'd have to add a row of islands right down the middle. You're straight away losing 4 parking spaces. You've created another obstacle for the snowplow. What we've done is place those islands at the end of a reasonable row of parking to kind of, allow cars to circulate around that island and not, hit a bumper of a car or, from what I understand is the city code was written in terms of green space. So if that green space is created with islands, we've got to make up for the number of parking spots with eating up more green space. We would have to expand those lots further south, further west. To hit on something I forgot earlier, Ms. Silvers asked about the bus. We did eliminate one approach and driveway from the front of the west lot, where previously there were 2 approaches. We're reducing that down to 1 approach, and that approach is slightly further west than where it was before. That's going to make for a safer access to the highway also for traffic flow at the end of the workday. You know, employees are pulling out of there, and it's gonna create a safer situation in that case.
Any other questions for the applicant?
No, I think we got the reasoning behind why they chose their design. All right, you talked about, sorry, I got my schematic here, about landscaping and things down here that aren't really, you know, completely designed yet, so, I think, without knowing the total plan, it could mitigate some things and still meet the intent with the city's code, so I guess, I don't have any more questions for you right now. Does anybody else?
Is your question for Chad?
For Chad, yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thanks. I guess what I'm kind of getting at is, you know, you try to get to a negotiated thing and meeting the intent, you know, if it's set back, whatever, you know, it's not like right up next to the street, but there's a good amount of setback. Is there something else to mitigate the intent? So do you foresee anything that could mitigate it? So if they came with the plan that they have now, is there anything that could mitigate to get more towards the intent? Meaning, are they gonna have more landscaping out to the street? Whatever system, whatever plan they have, is it gonna like meet more of the intent of the code, or what is your view there?
Essentially, if we're reviewing a landscape plan, we could take those items into consideration. We don't have one. They're just
Right.
basically asking to forego it.
Okay.
Now, do you have one shade tree every 40 feet? There could be existing trees already on the site, but you would call them out in a landscaping plan, would alleviate the need to do so. So my recommendation was to still keep with the intent of the code. Maybe we can negotiate, maybe it doesn't have to be 80%, maybe it can be 40, maybe just something that we go on, that when we have a landscape plan, we can still fulfill the intent of the code, still, you know, match everything, but until we have a landscape plan, I can't. You know, if we just waive the landscape screening altogether, you know, it makes it hard for me to review a landscape plan because I know that it needs to be screened.
Right.
Sure. So it's going to continue to be a work in process until all the plans are finished.
Right, and that's why, you know, I recommend the approval because it is a long way and a lot of plannings. But I still feel like we could negotiate a percentage to provide screening for that and still work with the landscape plan to make sure everything is taken care of.
You mean you recommended denial?
Denial.
We're talking about for the number two, item number two?
Oh, item number 2, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
So, okay, so I thought we were talking about the screening.
No, I'm talking about number 2.
Okay.
About the, 10 parking spaces. Is there anything in the landscaping that would mitigate that, or what's your view?
My view is you have a requirement that says 10, and you were proposed 13, 13, 13, and 13 in the middle. 17, 15, not a single thing matched, right? I'm not a designer, but if you took those 4 islands that are on the end and moved one of them in the middle, you fulfilled the code. So you eliminate 2 right there, and you could put 2 of them on the outsides and you could still meet the code. My point is, I just felt like this wasn't designed with our code in mind. My opinion is that it was designed, and then we said no, and they said, well, okay, can we still do it? So I still feel like you have 4 islands. If you look at it, if you move the island to the middle, you fulfilled all 4 rows in the middle. And if you take the 2 that you just alleviated and put them on the outside, you fulfilled the other 2. And to my comments on the western lot, that southwest or the southeast part of it where it gets really elongated, I can understand that because that's a long turnaround right there. So I mean, there are situations where it doesn't make a lot of sense to split just to split. but I feel like to the intent of the code, I feel like it could have been met, it just was not. Thus the reasoning for my recommendation.
But it doesn't violate code.
It completely violates code.
It completely violates code
Yeah, it didn't satisfy the code anywhere
because of the 10.
because of
Right.
the 10. Sometimes when you do variances, you know, the land presents a certain obstacle for you to do so, and that's why we have variances, when it's not necessarily a, you know, a man-made thing, or it's not, you know, we don't want to do it because we don't want to do it. That's where we have variances, where there are legitimate hardships. I feel in the eastern lot, there is no hardship other than they just didn't meet the code. You know, and I would make the argument that on the western lot, that southeast corner, where we do go to a long to provide that, I can understand why that's a little bit longer. If you had a semi that you wanted to swing out, you know, that 10-foot barrier right there might prove to be a barrier for them to do so.
So Matt, is this more of a monetary issue that you couldn't, for number 2, do this, or is it aesthetic, or is it
For number-
maneuverability? What is your reasoning?
The number two, the biggest issue we see is like if the future planning, there is plans in the future for a training addition in the center of those 2 parking lots, which is why we did not want to stretch it further west. And then that same east parking lot, stretching it to the east is problematic as well, because there is a truck driveway there. So really, we're trying to keep it as much over that existing footprint where it is today. And getting back to the requirement for islands between 10 spaces, if we were to split those rows of 13 in half, you would have 6 spaces between islands. And our feeling is that's pretty congested in terms of, you know, clearing snow and, you know, that number 10, you know, it's an arbitrary figure. I mean, I understand you want to have green space and trees that look nice every 10 spaces, but to put one every 6 spaces seems extreme in our opinion.
All right, yeah, I see what you're saying about the lot on the east. If you put an aisle in the middle, you're down to whatever, 6 and 7 or whatever. On the left side, you could put in one more sets of island, but it would take away a few parking spots. Maybe there's some considerations there for cost. I don't know, maybe it was how many cars you can get in a parking lot at one time, loading. So do you think there's anything that could mitigate this to get to the intent, or what's the way forward here from your perspective?
I like the trade for doing some screening in the future and tabling that landscape plan. You know, there fully is an intent to provide a landscape plan in the future. So the screening issue, if that's, you know, in terms of green space, in terms of beautification of the front of the property,
So what you're saying is proceed with voting on the resolution, except we're going to already omit number 1 because it's stormwater, omit item number 2, and we would be voting just on item 3, 4, and 5.
well, I would ask to maintain item 2 only for the fact, our wish is, leaving here today, we were hopeful to be able to install those physical parking lots. We've got excavators standing by to install the physical parking lot, but then follow up in the future with the planting schedule and the lighting schedule and those things that are going to really make that front pop. Today, we're hopeful to settle on the physical makeup of the parking lot that we could begin construction. There's a good portion of this year dedicated to creating the physical detention and parking areas around the building.
How soon, if approved, would you be starting construction on that?
Within days.
So in essence, what you just mentioned is remove, strike through. Number one, it's not needed. And two, you would come back, would table item 2 and come back at a later date for a landscape plan and go ahead and approve 3, 4, and 5.
I think
That
you're
should be
saying it
okay.
wrong.
Go ahead, Chad.
I think you're saying it wrong. So 1 doesn't show up on the resolution because it
Correct.
can't. So 2, as per the recommendation, was the landscape island, 3 was the maneuvering lane, and 4 is the screening.
Yep.
I think he is asking to table the screening on account of providing landscape plan at a later time.
So that's 4.
Is that correct?
I thought we were looking at tabling the islands and the parking spaces.
I thought he wanted the
Yeah.
variance
Well,
on
they
the
want
islands
to
and
finish the
tabling
parking
screening.
lot, so we have to decide on that. I think what they're wanting to table is the 80%, so would that be 5? Yeah,
4.
4, okay.
It says 5.
The application,
Yeah,
they
it says
applied
5
for,
on
Oh,
here.
yeah.
the application, they applied for 5, but the first one's not
Bidding 1,
available.
we're voting on 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah, 1's not in there, so don't even have to.
So basically, 2 is 1, 3 is 2.
You're voting on everything except for the stormwater. If you choose to table something out of that, that's what you're doing.
I guess my thing is, I think, aren't we up here talking about which would be, I guess, 1, the one that staff, the one that you're recommending we deny.
Correct.
I'm hearing 2 different things, and as somebody who's plowed, I can completely understand, I hate those islands. So, what is the city's reason for denying it? It doesn't meet code? Is that correct?
Correct. It's
Okay.
not an arbitrary number, it's your code. It was voted on by your citizens, it was approved by your council, that they wanted it every 10 spaces.
Is that just for that size lot, or is that every lot in general?
That's every lot. That's what we just voted for on Scott Drive last month as well.
Okay.
And we do have to maintain consistency.
I'm assuming that's why we have that big island out in the middle of the parking lot out there, correct?
I think that was done before.
Okay. I'm just looking at a map of areas around there, and I'm seeing, I guess, a lot of inconsistency throughout all these different places, so trying to kind of figure that one out.
Well, you have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
If you allow it to all go. I mean, the reason it was put there, it wasn't my doing, it wasn't anyone's singular doing. That's what the council passed, which is as the wishes of the citizens, and that's what we're here to enforce. And reason I recommend denial is because I didn't see a reason why we couldn't have that.
And back to his point, so your reason for not wanting them is you're saying you would have to expand the parking lot further to get the same number of spaces? And would that be your intent? If you have to have the 10, are you gonna make the lot bigger to get those extra spaces?
To achieve the same number of spaces, they would have to be expanded. And with the constraints of that center piece of grass and the driveways on either extreme end, you would be talking about a completely additional maneuvering lane with a completely, naturally, you'd want to fill that maneuvering lane with another number of spaces. You'd be growing that parking lot in unreasonable amount, in our opinion, to provide those islands and make up for those lost spaces. It would be, there are dashed lines on the plan for future parking. In that case, when those would get constructed, we'll be back submitting new plans, obviously, to expand those parking lots. But that's not in the plans today. But I guess back to the tabling of the landscaping, I may have spoke on that too, because you're right, the issues with the islands, not so much with the screening. If the mounding is substantial for the screening, we're on board to physically construct those mounds right away too. So it'd be nice to have approval on that item today, as well as the islands. We could certainly come back and add them in the future. We could get our construction done with the footprint that's there. I guess I'll have to go to battle with our customer and make sure he's okay with losing several parking spaces.
Well, that seems the logical thing to me to do would be to go ahead and table that number 2 as per the number in the resolution, and go ahead and vote then on 3, 4, and 5.
Yes, I think what we're trying to get to is we're trying to, is there a negotiated settlement that meets the intent, right? Because clearly this doesn't meet the code. So if we're gonna vote on it, it's kind of obvious, but what I'm asking is there anything else that's mitigating in the whole entire plan that would actually, get to a yes instead of, what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So that's why
like a
we're,
trade-off or a concession.
yeah, are there any,
This for that.
yes, because I mean, without like being able to look at a 3D plan view and being an engineer myself, I don't have that expertise, but we're trying to be helpful here. What's helpful to you and helpful to the city, is tabling this the right way to go. I mean, I'm thinking it is, but I want to make sure we're doing the right thing.
You still have the same decision with the same criteria next month in regards to landscape islands.
So I have a question. You said the intent is later down the road, building a training center and increasing that parking space. If you're increasing this parking space later down the road, are you wanting to stick to the 10 spaces or the mitigated spaces?
That it certainly has not even been talked about, but it makes sense that with those dashed lines showing the future, that it would be a mirror image or a continuation of the same pattern of islands. I think that's fair to say. Of course, that plan review would come in the future too. Certainly, as those parking lots grow towards the roadway, you guys may up your demands for the screening, and maybe at that future, let's say 5 years from now, if that were to happen, you might ramp up and say that now you do want more screening out front. I think the pattern of island there, we felt we were constrained east and west, where if we had the luxury of stretching it, then we could put 10 spaces between the islands and actually get some reasonable banks of parking between those islands. But appreciate your consideration to our design.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, so we've decided to move forward with the vote. First, we're going to make a motion to change the request for variance. So
Change the
the resolution, yeah. So in the resolution, there's 5 items listed. We're going to omit number 1, which is the request for the stormwater. We're going to vote on what's called items 2, 3, 4, and 5, which are variance for the requirement of landscape islands between rows of 10 parking spaces. I don't know how we want to word that.
Let me rephrase that. So I think what we're getting at is, we're going to make a motion to strike number 1 from the resolution.
It's already struck.
Okay.
If you look at the resolution, it's not listed.
And we're going to renumber the rest of them. Is that 1, 2, 3, 4? Right? 2 becomes 1? Or what's the best way to do this?
Whatever works for you.
So I believe what Mr. Henry's saying is he completely eliminated number 1 due to it not being up to us. So if you look at resolution 6-24, it only has 4 listed. So the first one that we have listed is the second variance that Hartsel requested. So
Okay.
they are already numbered,
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay. Okay.
Does
Okay,
that?
yeah, so we do not have to make a motion to change the resolution. It's now,
One, yeah,
1,
one,
2, 3,
that the
4.
stormwater is already gone, it wasn't even wrote into the resolution.
okay. So we can then just go ahead and vote on the 4 points in the resolution.
Should we vote on them individually? Each of the items individually?
Yeah, I would.
Okay. So I'll entertain a motion on item number 1.
I
I'll give
guess
a
my
stab.
opinion's probably gonna be different than the rest, but I would vote to just allow them to do it, because it seems like all the places around there look the same, and their current building has more than 10 spots between the parking spot. I know I'm gonna be different than everyone else on this, but that's,
Are you making that as a motion?
I motion to approve number 2, to allow them to do it.
Well, if we're going to do that, we might as well make a motion on all of them at the same time.
Well, I motion to approve, well, I guess the way it's written in here, we're denying it, so this is the confusing part about this.
No, that's the staff report. Their
Okay.
Their request is to,
For some reason, I'm missing the actual, I don't know if it just got left out of my book,
It's
but
near the end. It's near the end.
yeah. Well, here, okay. So written now.
Sorry.
I can't find mine either. Oh, I felt it.
Every 10 parking spots. So if I vote to approve this the way it's written now, it would force them to do the 10 parking spots versus they're not wanting to, so.
All right, let's resolve this, because the resolution is set up differently than the staff report, so.
Yeah.
So we're going to vote on the variance that's been requested, taken off the staff report page. And we're going to vote on them individually, and they're going to be called items 2 through 5. So I'll entertain a motion for number 2, which is a variance for landscape islands. While the western parking lot alignment is considerably less egregious in implementation and arguably explainable, the eastern lot was designed without regard for the development code in most all applications.
And I would motion to allow them that variance. And should I give, I'll give an explanation, my reason why. Looking at their previous parking lot, there's more than 13, 14, 15 spots in one section. There's another brand-new parking lot that was just put in that doesn't have islands at all. Looking at the school buildings, for example, there's no islands every 10 spots. So I don't, I know at some point we have to start doing the code, but I guess, or maybe look at changing it, but I don't want to force them to do something that nobody else in town has had to do. So that's my reason behind that. And I motion to allow them that variance for that section that you just read.
So I have a motion from Adam to allow the variance called number 2. Do I have a second?
I will second the motion.
So I have a motion to allow the variance. I have a second by Wayne. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Wayne? I'm sorry, Mr. Davy?
We're voting on,
Just number 2.
Just number 2.
Unallowable.
so I am on,
We're voting on the
So
variance of
I-
landscape islands.
You second it.
I second the motion,
Yeah.
but not the decision.
We were voting.
Yeah, you're voting.
You're voting on each variance separately, correct?
Right.
So this is the one that's just pertaining to landscaping?
Yes.
Landscaping
Okay.
islands.
Number 2.
So he
So I have my motion for Mr. C's.
to accept, to allow the variance, and you second it to allow the variance.
You just did the motion.
I just seconded the motion. Now
Now we're voting.
He can still vote no.
Okay,
I motion.
okay,
So
okay.
I
So
would
she's
be-
calling you to vote.
I'd be aye.
If you agree with it, no.
I would be an aye.
Okay, all right, now I understand.
I'm voting to allow them to have the variance.
Okay,
Okay.
so Mr. C's is my motion.
Yes.
Mr. Davy is my second.
Second motion. Yep.
Okay,
Now the
and
vote.
we're
Clerk, would you
voting.
please call the roll?
Okay, Mr. Davy.
Nay.
Okay. Mr. Davis.
Nay.
Mr. C's.
Aye.
Ms. Silvers.
Nay.
And Ms. Stein.
Nay.
So let the record show that the request for the island variance has been denied. Now we will vote on what's called number 3, which is maneuvering lane variance, considering the intended use of the parking lot and the ability for fire apparatus to successfully navigate the site. I'll entertain a motion to accept or deny.
I'll make a motion.
To accept,
Accept.
to approve the variance. Okay. So I have a
That,
motion to approve the variance of number 2,
I'll second that motion.
and I have a second by Debbie Stein. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Stein.
Aye.
Mr. C's.
Aye.
Mr. Davy.
Aye.
Ms. Silvers.
Aye.
Mr. Davis.
Aye. So we'll show that the record has approved the variance request for number 3. For number 4, the variance from pedestrian access ways, because of how far this site is away from public right-of-way, this is considerable undertaking to get to the proposed lots. I'll entertain a motion to approve the variance or deny the variance.
I'll make a motion to approve.
So I have a motion to approve the variance,
Second.
I have a second from Wayne. From Wayne. Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Silvers,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mr. Davy,
Aye.
Ms. Stein,
Aye.
Mr. Sees.
Aye.
So let the record show that item number 4, the variance has been approved as requested. We'll now vote on number 5, which is the variance for low-impact screening using a 3-foot earthen mound over the 80% screening. I'll entertain a motion to accept or deny the request.
I'll make a motion to approve item number 5 for the variance for the low-impact screening.
I'll second that.
So I have a motion by Debbie Stein to accept the variance request on number 5 for the 3-foot earthen mound, and I have a second by Adam Sees. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Sees,
Aye.
Mr. Davy,
Aye.
Ms. Stein,
Aye.
Ms. Silvers,
Aye.
Mr. Davis.
Aye. So let the record show that item number 5 variance request has been approved for the 3-foot earthen mound. Thank you. I believe that can,
We just want to make sure, too, that we include those other 2 parcels, amend that resolution to include those, because it encompasses more than the one. Thank you.
Do we have to vote for the resolution as a whole or the sections? Okay.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll give you a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We're adjourned. That was brutal.
Yeah. Thanks for fixing my brain. No, I get what you're saying, but like Chad said,